don't read what you don't like. It sounds obvious, but there's some things that aren't nearly as obvious. So, one of the first things that is quite obvious if you read what you don't like is you'll feel forced. Common examples are books that you have to read for school. Because I remember I never went out of my way to read those books, like the classics and stuff. I was interested in some Greek mythology, so when we read the Iliad, that was quite interesting, and the Odyssey as well. But books like other books, like Mice and Men, Things Fall Apart, while they were good, I didn't necessarily like them. I'd say they were good stories, but I still just didn't like them. And it still really felt forced. One, because I think the main reason was I knew that we were going to write an essay on it. And so I think that just took the enjoyment out of it. Another time you feel forced is social pressure. So friends all telling you to read a certain book, and then you fall into the pressure, and then you decide to read it, but you don't actually like it, but because everyone tells you that's good, you keep on reading it until the end. But you still don't like it. You still feel forced. And the third is cultural pressure. So this is where your entire culture is reading like a certain book. Like, so for most people my age, their childhood was Harry Potter, reading the Harry Potter series, Percy Jackson, Michael Vey. I'd say Percy Jackson and Harry Potter were like the biggest. But yeah, that's cultural pressure. And if we're talking about Percy Jackson and Harry Potter and Michael Bay and those books, I'd say, well, I'm biased, but I think that they were well worth it because I like them a lot. But that doesn't mean you will. So, if you feel forced, you will find excuses to not read. You will find anything to get away from it if you really dislike what you're reading. Personal experience, I was reading Nietzsche, a philosopher, and I really did not like reading his works, but I kept forcing myself to, and it was just, I hated like every second of it. I wanted to not read it. I just wanted to stop reading it. Like, it was not enjoyable for me. And well, at the time my goal was to read 50 pages a day, and I was pretty consistent, but with Nietzsche it was just a struggle. And the thought that came into my mind was, even if I stop now, like if I stop reading the book, it's not going anywhere. I'm not gonna magically miss out on anything. I mean, Nietzsche's dead for a while. His works live on, but his works will always be there. And then on the other hand, even if I do read it, how much will I retain? Like, how much of the information will I remember if I'm disinterested? The answer is pretty much like nothing. Maybe like 10%. Probably less than that. And so that brings me to a second point. You won't remember like the information or the story of the book as much, because at least for what I was reading when I was reading Nietzsche, it was for completion. It was for the 50 pages, rather than for understanding his work. And for one, that's pretty rude to a philosopher who, well, let's say he had a lot of health issues and he turned insane, but he still kept writing, even all through all that. Reading what you don't like will feel like a chore. It won't. If you like reading, reading will turn into something that you never wanted it to be. And, well, I think the best way to preserve reading is to read what you like, to not have it a chore, to be enjoyable. Otherwise, it's going to be like a second job. Well, not a mini part-time job, essentially, with not necessarily with time, but with the stress. Perhaps you never liked reading. I would say if you can't read well, that's absolutely not okay. Not in this age. You absolutely need to be able to read, and if you can't, that is unacceptable. Just straight up. If you can't read, that's unacceptable. But I think that a lot of people have bad experiences with reading because of previous experiences. For example, a lot of people will conflate reading with school, and, well, I mean, most teenagers do not like school in the sense of the academic stuff. Friends, really great. Fun, really great. School, not so much. And I could blame the school system, but I think it's just a culture thing. I think that the entire culture of school is just not the best, I'll say. Other associates reading things like you should read this, and that's basically social pressure. Like, you need to read this, it's so good. Like, do you really? I mean, the book's always going to be there, so do you really? And I mean, I think it's the people who associate enjoyment with reading that will keep on reading. Yeah. Whether it be initially or after returning to reading for a long time, I think that enjoyment from reading is what will keep you there. So, if you read what you don't like, you won't get the value out of the book. Like, why have a book when you don't want to read it? Like, it just wastes space and time and mental energy. A book is something you invest into. It's like a transaction. You are investing your time into it so that it can give you something out. Assuming that you are buying a book, you're paying money to get the book, and then you're also paying time to read the book. So you should expect something of value, of the same value from what you paid. But at least from what I've seen, a lot of self-development books can be summarized into one sentence. So what does that say about their price and the time you spent for it? I don't want to discredit the authors too much, but seriously, a lot of books could just be summarized into like one blog post or one sentence. And finally, if you really don't like reading, or if you still want to read the book that you're currently reading but you really dislike it, take a break. Come back to it after a while. Maybe you'll have renewed interest. Maybe take some time to research the author. Take some time to look into how his physical health, mental health, emotional health when he wrote the book. The book will be waiting. So you don't need to worry. Like a lot of things, we often only realize it's the true value of what we lost when it is gone. Life. We take for granted our friends, our parents, other people, until the funeral, when we mourn for the deaths. Yeah, this turned really dark. But come back to the book after a while. And don't take for granted what it is.